And here we are in the field sessions. It's another chance to get together and chat about more fieldsy things, which I'm really, really privileged today to share this space, this series with a new author. So a very big welcome to the Field Space, to the Fields podcast. We run these series called the Stack series, which is all about books and new authors. And today I have a very special author with me who's recently published a book, and we get to chat about that today, which is so wonderful. And so I want to say a big welcome to you, Sanjeev Chitre, to the Field Space, to the podcast, and to just being able to share in this journey today.
Well, thank you, Nicole, and the Field Space infrastructure to invite me and to share what was the journey of the Father of Nations, and your background preparation has been impeccable in enabling me to think through what are some of the important things that in my journey in writing this book I could share with you. So thank you for that opportunity.
It's only a pleasure, and thank you for being here. And I want to give a shout out to Parker Publishers for putting us in touch. Thanks to them
yes,
also.
We should. Yes, yes, we both should thank them for that introduction.
And I actually want to start off with something that they sent me, when they were telling me about your book, and I thought it was really apt to read that. So they said, what happens when an entrepreneur from the streets of Mumbai writes a political thriller that Emmy Award-winning journalist Ari Malbo calls unsettling in the best possible way. You get Father of Nations, a book that doesn't just critique the gap between the haves and the have-nots, it hands you a blueprint to close it. And so you, Sanjeev, you've spent decades in business and technology across 3 different continents, if I have it correct, and you were kind of asking this question, that everyone's thinking probably, but afraid to ask. What if the most powerful person in the world actually used that power to unite us all and to create good in the world? And so your book is part manifesto, but part kind of page turner, as they call it. And so it's really like a doctrine of wealth and peace and growth. And I really love that. It resonates so much with me and a lot of things that I think about, but we'll get into that. I'm very excited. So I'd love to start there with where your journey started and how you lived in Mumbai, you grew up there, and those are really humble beginnings up to where you were building a business. And how did that shape you as a person and to bring you to this point in writing this book?
So I think, Nicole, thank you again for the clarity with which you ask the questions. The journey in writing the book was the pain and the understandings that I felt, in the process of creating the wealth that I was so very fortunate to create and to share. And so in my vocabulary now, and I'll go back to the school days, it's very difficult to accept the word, charity. It really is a very challenging word. It should not exist in the dictionary of the Webster's dictionary or for any dictionary. Because, Nicole, charity creates a giver and a taker. It has that embedded purpose in it. I am the giver, you are the taker, or you are the giver, I'm the taker, and creates immediately in that transaction a have and a have not relationship. But I love my dog. I give him food and he gives me licks. So we share the things in the world. So each person in this world, animal, has something to share. So I rather replace that whole process of charity with the word of sharing, because it creates an equality of status and gives both the opportunities to exist in the give space, which is a sustainable space of the universe, rather than a give take space, which is not a sustainable space of the universe, right? So in growing up as a child in the suburbs of Mumbai, in a town called Thane, where I went to school in this Christian school called the St. John's High School. Therefore, it was an English medium school. And so I was, exposed to a variety of diverse people, not just Christians, but a different ethnicity in India.
Mm.
And so I could see as a growing student, there was no difference in my mind between the haves and the have nots because we all wore a school uniform. Some of them were crispier than the others, some of them had more of them than the others, but essentially it was a uniform, and the uniform created this mindset of equality when you play with these things. So growing up itself, I never believed in this conceptualization of the haves or the have nots, right? We just thought everybody has a different task and we did their lives together. And of course, you could see the wealth on the streets. And my father was a hardworking man. So eventually, he became a businessman in his life. So I saw that transition of our own from a, I don't want to call the have nots because I was privileged to be whatever I got, to becoming this person in which, or to living in the family in which there was more to give, right? So that transition sort of was embedded in my growth, including when I started my company. Because even in entrepreneurship, you have you can, if you don't plan well, you can create the haves and the have nots. The employees become the have nots, and the management and the shareholders become the haves, right? So one has to design the to minimize that inequality, and that responsibility goes to the founder and the CEO, and that's what I did in my first company that was the fastest growing company in the semiconductor space for 5 years in a row, won all kinds of award, giving me the Entrepreneur of the Year awards, all that kind. The single most thing of achievement that I felt was biggest in my case, rooted in my education system, was that 25% of the company was owned by the employees, from janitors to everybody. And to share that wealth when the company became $1 billion plus company in the first 4 years was the biggest gift I had from the universe, and the opportunity to do that. But you have to design these things. And so you don't just get up one day and say, that's what you want to do. It becomes, and that's when you get up one day and decide, that's when the charity becomes the stuff. Because I gave my janitor the same opportunity to participate in building his company as I had as the founder and the chief executive of the company, right? So he just did different things. That's all. And so I think that rule is what really helped me think through this process, and hurt myself in the journey internally to see the difference between the haves and the have-nots, and it keeps on widening because the haves can afford to keep more of what they have, and the have nots are just basically surviving in the process. So that's sort of the state. How could one change that, and how could one think through the process of it? Definitely, entrepreneurship, Nicole, is the one of the significant most pathways, because every other profession requires education, requires training, requires social strata, requires backup. But entrepreneurship is the only pathway to creating wealth that is agnostic to race, religion, sex, nationality, boundaries. Anybody in the world can become an entrepreneur. And so, if we want to create the equality between the haves and the have nots on a global footprint of possibilities, entrepreneurship becomes one of the major tools of that element of making that happen. And entrepreneurship being omnipresent. I'm not talking about entrepreneurial subject. It's one of the tools. You need tools to create that. You just can't talk about it. So the doctrine of growth, wealth, and peace, uses these experiences of realistic existences. These are real experiments that have been done in the journey, but small people or small, people in their capacity can only execute what their capacity is. And so, how would one create this global transformation of the haves and the have nots? And we can go through the details, is to see a person who has the power in the world to create that transformation and be aware of the fact and committed to being equality. And so, a father of a family always sees his children as similarly, whether it is a woman or a girl or a boy, both have to be done as equality basis. There is no haves or have nots typically in the mind of the father of the family. So a father of a nation takes the responsibility of creating that equality of existence in that nation. And so, but now we have, as you can see, because of that, the disparity and the wars that come between nations. So a father of nation would do not have the power to create this global wealth and prosperity in any doctrine that you could create, because it would be still restricted to that region. So in order to create a global citizenship of equality or of abundance, if not equality, which is the same in a way, we would have to have a person who is powerful across the world. And that is what led me to putting the story around and the drama and the steps and the power, because without the power, this would be an unexecutable story. But with the power and the designation and the influence, and who could be better positioned to do that than the president of the most powerful country in the world? Whether you like it or not, that today is that reality. So using his vision through his eyes to drive this as the family that he is responsible for, whether it is his closest family at home, whether it is neighbor's family as domestic, or whether it is his whole family as a nation. So that's why I chose the title of the Father of Nations. And that has been my evolution from the school days through the entrepreneurship, through the blessings of the universe, to write this book.
It's quite a journey to get to this point, and I can imagine writing it has been such a rewarding feeling, as books often are. I feel like a lot of authors, you write because you have so much within you that you want to channel. And first, I want to say that I feel like what you write about and what you talk about resonates so much for me, because I really believe in equal energy exchange in the world, and I think a lot of the systems in our world have become very controlling and very warped in so many ways that it doesn't allow for this equal, fair exchange where everyone really owns their value. And this is the part where entrepreneurship, and I know you also wrote another book about entrepreneurship, which has been really successful. And I feel it's the same thing, and my mom said to me recently, do you think you are really an entrepreneur? And I always call myself an entrepreneur as an artist entrepreneur. And I said to her, but I think everyone is an entrepreneur. I can't really say like that there's no place to not be one, because we all self-starting in our own right. We all have to own our value. We all have to do our accounting. We all have to do our marketing of our brand as a person and look after ourselves. And so I agree with you in that. And I think that I find it really interesting that you were able to get to this point of writing the book as a fiction, but then kind of very a real take on, yes, what is leadership? What is being able to be a servant of the people in some way too, as a president, of one country, but maybe of lots of nations. And we're living in a really interesting time to have this conversation. I think that, we're all kind of being pushed to a place where we're having to embrace each other and community. So I'm curious about how you got to writing the book. Was it kind of just mulling in your mind, or was there a journey that kind of prompted you to write it?
Yeah. So I think I shared with you my despiseness for the word charity, right? So I don't like that word. I don't use that word. Nobody should use that word because, like we said, it creates a giver and a taker, institute.
Mm.
So, in order for people to prosper, which, giver and taker is the haves and the have nots, right? I mean, that's the replacement words for that category of stuff. So, if everyone has the ability and the possibility of fulfilling on and his or her own dreams or her passion, then what are the missing pieces? Are the tools that enable that to happen, right? And when those tools are not made available or are not known sometimes, you go into this substitute of life, which is at kinds creates the whole dilemma of going to killing somebody and going to heaven and getting this 90 virgins and things like that. The base cause root of that is not the religious, but it's their mind. It doesn't have the ability to or the opportunity to create for themselves a world that they really would like to live in. So you now have the have nots that are manipulated with whatever religions and stuff like that to be able to do and being through this journey, it's just very tiring to see this, read this over and over again, or to listen to the stuff now. And you can do two things: you can tune the life out, or you can decide to do something about it, right? So I wrote the book on entrepreneurship because I wanted to enable the needle of success that stuck at 3% of success over the first 4 or 5 years of business, which creates wealth, but to more, because if that is the process of wealth creation, we should enable that process. And so I focused on the tools again there to help that stuck motor being increasing, because if we just increase by 1-2% more, which should be more, then you would create more wealth and more. And people cannot give what they don't have. See, you can only give what you have, unless like the United States government, which they don't have, but they put it on debt. But not all of the people can borrow the debt kind of existence, right? So my
Yeah.
thought process in sort of was, hey, stop complaining like you did in the entrepreneurship space. If it is bothering you, then write something called the Doctrine of Growth and Peace. So this book began as a me to create a manifesto of elements that one could intelligently share, whether it is on a conversation or a blog or whatever that was. I didn't know the instrument in which, but putting the thoughts together. So, in order to understand the doctrine of growth and peace, I went back and I read again a few times the doctrine of war and peace. because what created the conflict of the war and peace was the necessary gap to create between growth and peace and wealth and peace. And so once I was able to look at the disparity that created war and peace, then my entrepreneurial background helped me to start looking at the tools that actually were a part of my journey in enabling me to become entrepreneur through the entrepreneurship create wealth. And of course, in the journey of my entrepreneurship, Nicole, there were hugely successful ventures and they were challenging ones which left a lot of arrows on my back. But that is a part of the learning. As they say, you learn a lot more from the challenges of managing the difficulties of it. And so it allowed me a little more insight through that process in beginning to handle this doctrine of growth and peace. And as I began to think of this, writing this book, through so using some basis of entrepreneurship, had read the doctrine of war and peace, I was fortunate to be able to tap on the soldier at on my shoulder at one of these events. I was sitting for breakfast, and some lady got up. I was dressed in my business suit, and she said, "Sir, can I sit down? Are you a writer?" And out of nowhere did this person come about, and I said, "No, I am not yet a writer, but I'm thinking." So she said, "I am a publisher in UK, and I like to listen to, the universe sends these things." And the reason I tell you these stories is because we as humans and the signals come from the universe, and you can consider universe as fate, you can consider universe as God, you can consider universe as probabilities, whatever suits the origination of that element you can adapt to, right? So as I was sitting out there, I shared with her. She said, "That's a great topic. If you finish the book, please call me. I'll be happy to guide you." And she gave me the card. And so of course, having read the book Alchemy and things like that, you are looking for the signs of post that come to your life. So then from there, I go to my room, and just before getting ready, I turn the TV on, and comes the movie The American President, right, in its trailer form. Now I'm thinking, okay, this I loved that I'd seen it, so I loved it on the just coming to the through the advertisement side. So I go to work from there, from Montreal. I go to Detroit for my second step. I turn the TV on. It's The American President. Now, the channels in Canada have no control over channels in Detroit. And now I'm beginning to think, what's the purpose here, right? Because I had on all of this happening within a week period of time. I go from Detroit,
Yeah.
go to Phoenix, I turn the television on, the American president. That's when I
Yeah.
knew that some way or the other, my doctrine of wealth and peace that I was thinking to put together has to be connected with the president, the American president, the drama, the thing that goes along, but more importantly, the power of the president. Because, like Michael Douglas says, he is working to be the president, but I am the president. And in that, you need that kind of power to be able to deliver and implement, and the passion of creating this stuff. And since the father of the nations, who considers the global citizenship as a part of his responsibility, was then began the background of the father of nations and how it evolved.
Wow. I've got goosebumps as you were talking because I really believe in, well, resonance, synchronicity. I don't think there's anything like coincidence, and I do believe that we are our external reality is a direct reflection of our internal reality. So everything that you're thinking and feeling, and that's sitting in this energy blob, the universe just mirrors that back to you, you know. And so I think that's so beautiful that you had that interaction, and that you, more so that you actually took action on that and followed the nudges of your heart, you know. So I'm really happy that we can have this conversation, and that you're looking back, it's amazing journey for you. You know, I think I want to kind of stop at the word power for a second, because it's something that's such an interesting word to me. And I feel like power means the kind of embodiment of the strength within yourself, the resilience within yourself, but also really being able to take accountability for who you are in the world and your purpose. And it's something that I think humans struggle with a lot. But what does that like kind of look like for you when you wrote the book? How did that feel to think about this power as a man holding, as a leader, you know, as a servant of the people?
So, Nicole, when I wrote the book, the political reality was, or when I began to think of writing the political reality was much more different. But
Mm.
the unpeacefulness in the world, whether it was Iran and or replaced by Iraq, those who are still continuing, it existed in different forms. Just the nations had changed, but the
Mm.
disagreements and the conflicts were still, present. So, uh, because I wanted this to be not a story of somebody privileged,
Mm.
right? I wanted this to be a story of somebody who came from nothingness to create this powerful transition. And the one of the realities that I could see in that world was President Obama, who
Mm.
came from South African roots and who did a lot to believe, who were much more open and considerate about the borders and all of that kind of stuff. So I felt that if I incorporated in his kind of personality the power of the father of nations, right? Then there
Mm.
would be more sort of meaningful for the population outside the world to think if this is possible. It is not only happening because you have a American
Yeah.
president. It is happening because there is a human that became an American president,
Mm.
and has the ability to cause the changes and
Mm.
to bring the sort of interject the romanticness in it, was to create a story that takes away from the politics of the reality to implement them into an engaging watchfulness. Because if and when, if ever becomes a movie, and my thought process in my mind was that if people came out and said, God, if this is only true, the world would be a different place. And that
Yeah.
hope and that pathway, and that has come out to be so at the end of the book by, whether it is remarks by Anderson Cooper or all the other MSNBC people, it is a sort of a transformational thought process. It isn't transformational. There is nothing about the book that is, those are practical elements brought together in order to cause a change and a challenge, address a challenge that exists in the society, whether it is
Mm.
locally, domestically, or internationally. And that is where I created the ties, which is the customer service enhancements, which is globally, which is applicable, of course, across the world, but it can start at a place. And then the whole rebuilding of a nation from the tools, because if it was destroyed Then there were lots of nations who could create self-sufficiencies in the format of it. And then lastly, to give the extra assets of the country that has the haves, to share it with the have-nots, to create an engaging business and opportunities for other countries of the world, and create not
Mm.
a giveaway model, but an income model from that through its simple engines, financial engines like that, would probably make people think it is possible, it is achievable. And another thing, Nicole, throughout the book, I never wanted to use the stick. I wanted to use the approach of the carrot. So it was not the tariffs, but the incentives that creates
Mm.
the difference between a stick and a carrot. That's the way to achieve
Mm.
this thing. So and that is possible globally, in that space. So I think that my purpose in implementing this thing through a black president is to bring down the availability and the relationships of the readers and hopefully the
Mm.
watchers to a level where it's thinking, yes, this can be possible. And that was
Mm.
what was ingrained in the writing and the scripting of the book.
Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed it being like a character, because I think it's really important for us. We get so, as humans, we like to box things and we like to kind of have our own biases and stereotypes. And it's very difficult for us to separate ourselves from those things. But if you have a character, and this is why we love watching movies, this is why we love fantasy and involving ourselves in books that take us out of our reality, because it allows us to open up our minds and our hearts to things. And I would love to see this as a movie. I feel like this is what media is for, is to change the world and show us that things are possible. And so many times I've watched a film and I'm like, oh, that is my experience. Oh, okay, actually, if I did this maybe it would have helped me. So you learn through media. It's a wonderful transformational tool. I mean, it could go both ways, but if you use it with beautiful intention, it's amazing. And I love that you created this character. So, yeah, tell me a little bit more about kind of creating that character and what that felt like for you, and you know, crafting this person and where they came from. Did it feel like it was a lot of your own journey, or do you feel like you could really like separate yourself and write the character?
Nicole, one of the things that I have learned is unless I have gone through that experience,
Mm.
it doesn't qualify me to create or build on that experience because
Mm.
I cannot see. That's why in the entrepreneurship you have millions of books as how to become a successful entrepreneur. The people who write the book have never been an entrepreneur of execution themselves. They just
Yeah.
read some things and collect the thoughts. And now, of course, ChatGPT what makes it easy. But the point is that unless you have gone through the process, it becomes very
Mm.
difficult to put the realistic picture of any of that thing in a executable manner. So each
Mm.
element of that book, element of the stories, have been in some way actually successfully or unsuccessfully experienced and executed by my personal journey to becoming an entrepreneur,
Mm.
right? So that's one. Secondly, the bonds of these kinds of things, the stories have to begin with some vision and promise. And the reason I brought Obama's Your Childhood in my college is because I wanted to inspire that you can see and think the vision of what one can be and then
Mm.
begin to persevere that process through. So, as a person, as a kid who comes into my St. John's High School, and the teacher Sarah asks, please write a story on whom you want to be. And this new coming kid comes into class and says, I want to be the father of nations, brings the innocence of the childhoodness
Mm.
to create a potential inspiration that has to then survive through all the realities and the testful journeys of life, to still keep the focus on his childhood dream of becoming the father of nations, was the anchoring, underlining, sort of the element to it. That it needed a person to him to remember what he had said and how it evolved. And that was the role of this Indian boy, which I thought, was my experience as him speaking, and how through the colleges, every element of that evolved. Because, for example, the technology transfer thing, it was an organization that I ran as a college student, which didn't go too many far, but it taught me a lot of things of bringing low, cheaper technologies to create local products and stuff like that. So that was not something that was fictitious. It actually, I went through a couple of years, and I'm making him as a part of that journey, gives him the foothold and the confidence that this is possible. So that, because then the mission and the determination that him as a human being to that cause becomes real. But it is essentially my heart speaking through his determination, because he is in a position to execute that. That was how that thing went to the next stage, and in being implemented from the senator and keeping in touch, and all of that, that is a fiction to be made. But I was in Madison, Wisconsin. He was in Chicago. So there are bridges of realities, but they have nothing to do with actual engagement. That's why it's a political fiction in its manner. But the anchorage of that is real. My journey, because I didn't have a visa and all of that, those are real facts. Those are my real journeys. And then as he comes to the place to really understanding the disparity, I've got to take him back to South Africa, to his roots. And that's why setting up a location of transformation into the roots where he came from, where such a capability, other science or certain older technologies could create vibrancy in an economy, is a real thing, because that is what I did, of setting up solar production plants in different parts of the world. So every element of this, it has a certain level of high integrity knowledge that has been embedded in each of these principles.
I love that you've woven this all together in the most beautiful way, and I think it's quite amazing. I'm sure when you were writing, and how the flow of ideas come, but they eventually do intermingle in creating a book. So I want to honor that and say, again, thank you for putting this out into the world. And I'm such a firm believer of, all of us together creating, like you mentioned, quantum wealth in the book. And that's something that we all are, that is meant for us. We deserve to have that, and maybe you can just kind of give our audience a little bit of an insight into what is quantum wealth to you.
Yeah. See, I want to create a discomfort in the minds of the readers, right? Because every one of us probably goes to a restaurant and think I should own a restaurant. I mean, because there is cash,
Yeah.
one of these days I'm going to own every of my damn
Yeah.
friends, 99% would never do nothing. 99.99% would never do anything about it. But they feel good. They see the cash flow. They see the gloriness of it. But they don't see the hard work that goes into keeping a restaurant going because they're unfamiliar with it, and they would never even think of doing that kind of stuff.
Mm.
So why I created when you have a job, when you take a job, you get your paycheck on time, you get your 401ks, you get even your RSUs and your healthcare. So it's a cash flow, you know. There is a cash flow. It's predictable. And, all jobs are risky, but it's predictable. I call that as cash flow wealth. One is not bigger or smaller than the other because you know that you work, you will get the money in your bank.
Mm.
But as an entrepreneur, it's very difficult. The reason you go into the entrepreneurship as a wealth creation engine is not because you get these RSUs or you get these things. It's because when you succeed, somebody at whether at exit or whatever it is, gives you this chunk of wealth. So I use the word quantumness of wealth
Mm.
because it's a relative word from $10 to billions of dollars, right? So
Mm.
the ability to get that wealth in a package. So the only place that has is where in entrepreneurship, where entrepreneurial ventures can be sold to somebody to create that st- accessibility to wealth. Then you have
Mm.
the option to share, to do anything with it. So the definition of quantum wealth is contrary to the cash flow wealth, which has lesser risk of execution and doesn't have the big reward. But you can also see this, Nicole. The top 100 richest people in the world, 99 of people of their wealth is created through entrepreneurship. You don't see the CEO of Chase or the CEO of Bank of America or being in the top 500 people of wealthiness, right? The wealth that is created is not by the CEO of Goldman Sachs. Of course, he's a billionaire, but Larry Ellison and Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg,
Mm.
which none of that even existed 10, 50. Just to give you an example, in the same Google, the founders of Google's have created huge wealth. Of course, the CEO of Google, Panchal, has created wealth, and it's lots of wealth, but it's not that quantumness of wealth that has been created. So I
Mm.
consider entrepreneurship as a pathway, an opportunity to create that quantum wealth. And that's the definition between quantum
Mm.
wealth and cash flow wealth.
I love that. I love it. And I also feel like while you were talking, this idea came up to me that perhaps why it's so profound is that it's addressing the gaps and in society, when we're all entrepreneurs and we're looking for the gaps, we're trying to build better as a community and as a society, then it can create quantum wealth, not just for ourselves, but for everyone, because now everything's multiplying exponentially. So I really love that concept, and I want to kind of put it out there in the universe that we can all do this together, and it's it's not just a dream; it can be a reality, and which is exactly what your book is trying to say. I also wanted to ask you, kind of what is your message to people reading the book? Yes, we have the wonderful power of one leader that has influence to be able to change the world and be the father of nations. But for each one of us in our own journey, what is it that you feel people could do tomorrow to create that wealth together and create more community?
That's a very powerful thought, Nicole. And it's the upside down pyramid of what the book is about, right? In everything in what you want to do, and what I've loved about you since day one is the passion you have for it. When you speak with passion. Of course, God has given you the grace, the beauty, and all of that, but the passion that is being embedded in you, it just comes out, right? Because you speak about yourself as with that passion. So, in order for anyone to be able to have the desire, and most people do, I don't know what percentage is, but I would say more than 60, 70%, maybe 80% of the people always have a passion in it. Culturally, they are, rail guarded in their journey to think, not think outside because the responsibility of the family,
Mm.
etc., etc. Right. So there are guardrails that get put on you during the process. But small or big, right? The ability and the desire to create wealth, exists for everybody. My message to each one of those people who want to go get up for the job, even they come to me at the age of their retired, they said, now that they have the time to fulfill their dream, they because they have taken care of the responsibility and stuff like that. So they have associated in their mind that this entrepreneurship is a game of roulette, and they don't want to play that game, which it can be unless I mean, it doesn't have to be, but it is in overall because of the success rates and stuff like that. It is that case. But the if you take that out, they come to you and says, I want to now do, I don't know now, but I've always wanted to be an entrepreneur, right? So my next book is about entrepreneurship in the golden years, right? Because we can create engagement of minds, less healthcare cost. Or, I mean, these are just by giving, the government is better of giving us small dollars of to start them in small entrepreneurial businesses and have their minds engaged and rather than pay for this huge medical cost that is a side effect. That's just one element. The point is that I want these people not age related in any ways, that there are tools that they should explore and opportunities that they can identify that would be able to get to the beginning of the process.
Mm.
Otherwise, Nicole, you are like the Wall Street guy who's buying the Wall Street every day, never invest a single penny in the Wall Street, but plays a fake game of buying and stocks and selling the stocks. It is not the same as putting your own money in to really know how this game really impacts. So if there is this thought process in that person, I want to do it, then it is up to him or her to find these opportunities, whether it's in the rural area, whether it is a semi-urban area or the urban area, that it is possible for them to create those opportunities, right? And the 90% of the people, Nicole, will tell you, oh, I want to do my job and I want to do this on the side hustle and things like that. Okay, that may be a reasonably way to start, but it requires that passion that you have, the commitment
Mm.
thing you have to go pursue and make that happen. So my message, if there is, I'm not capable of delivering a message, but I can suggest to these people that, hey, look at the possibility. If you really want to do this, explore the possibility of
Mm.
making it happen. Don't just think of what it would be and what I should do and should I own a restaurant and anything like that. There are lots of little ways, and the world is going to be full of entrepreneurial opportunities, especially with all the bigger tasks being taken away by this whole AI and whatever infrastructure
Mm.
of AI. In underdeveloped nations, it may not be, but there are still opportunities to be able to make this happen, and there are elements in which they could create these things for themselves. They don't have to work. They could go to a
Mm.
company and says, "Sir, I'm working here. Can I do this by myself, or can you help me reduce your cost so I can go do this for you?" That's just that is a very effective way of getting into the
Mm.
process of wealth creation. So whether it is called entrepreneurship, whether it is called entrepreneur, it really doesn't matter. So the awareness that needs to be there for them, that it is possible for them to create these wealth creation opportunities that are outside the element of their thinking, because now they are going into the they don't know what they don't know space. You see, there are three areas of the universe, as you know. You know what you know, which is 1 to 2% of the opportunities that the universe brings. Then there is the you know what you don't know, which means you know your uncle has something, but you don't know that. But that's another 2 to 3% of the universe opportunities. But 95% plus of the opportunities that the universe has is in the you don't know what you don't know space. You and I are exploring an opportunity in the don't know what you don't know space. I don't know you, you don't know me. We are trying to put something together that would create, syndicated capabilities and stuff like that. The challenge, Nicole, is in the don't know what you don't know space. There, before you get a breakthrough, the possibility of getting a breakdown is very high. So if you
Mm.
work through that breakdown, the rewards of the breakthrough are significant. And that's what successful entrepreneurs do. They work through that breakthrough, breakdowns to create these breakthroughs. Now, breakthroughs can be small or breakthroughs could be big. But my second message to these kinds of, once you have identified this with a passion, then persistence after passion
Mm.
is the next thing to enable that to create the steps. So then once you have the persistence, yeah, and then my last is never lose humility, because
Mm.
in any journey of creating wealth or friend, humility is the most powerful tool that you can have for learning. Most entrepreneurs have their egos so high, and so have I had it in my journey. So I speak where I had to kill my, work on killing my ego, and it still does show up sometime, but at least now I'm aware of it. So having humility as a tool in that process of passion and persistence creates a much more probability of success in what you intend to do. And that is my book, Through the Message, because everything the book, the president has the humility to go do these things. He has the passion, he has the persistence in executing such a global implementation.
Oh, oh, you said it so nicely. I love that. And I just before you said humility, I wanted to give another P. I was going to say it's the three Ps, passion, persistence, and I was going to say pray, because I'm finding that I like entrepreneurship is driving me to my knees. But
Yeah.
humility is definitely that. I think that when you go into that space, you have to kind of step out of the way. You have to really channel what wants to come into the world. And if that means, killing the ego and re-identifying with yourself every single day in a new way, it's worth it, I think. And yeah, I want thank you for the message to everyone.
I believe in prayers myself, but it is not necessarily always a global message, because prayers means you hope for success, but
Mm,
obviously humility allows you to work for success. And
yeah,
so that's of course we all must be thankful, which is a definition of a prayer. You thankfully
yeah.
ask, and I agree with you, but in a business world, it becomes difficult to to provide a definition around the role other than it is the inspiration to connect with yourself. And connecting with yourself creates the entrepreneurship in the now, and which is what you and I
Yeah.
had talked about last time.
Yeah,
What is the
I love that. And I'm
entrepreneurship
glad you
in the now?
clarified. I'm glad you clarified that because, prayer, I agree with you that hope is such a strange concept. But when you can tune into your inner self and like you were following your nudges in your journey, to write the book. I also believe gratitude is such a powerful, powerful, powerful energy attracting abundance and maybe quantum wealth to you and helping you kind of take your steps in any process and anything in life that you are tackling. So again, thank you so much for writing the book. Thank you for being who you are in the world as an entrepreneur and creating quantum wealth for yourself and others. I also believe as we do things for ourselves, we are collectively doing them for others because we're all kind of one. And we're here for one life experience. So I really, really appreciate that. And thank you for coming onto the podcast again. And I was going to ask you about technology. You addressed that already. I was going to ask you what's next. You told me it's the book for the oldies. So you answered all the questions. But I just want to say thank you as a
Of
final
course.
thought.
There's only one question I have of you is when you read the book, or as you read through the book, and if and when you associated, related yourself in the progress of the book, what was the key takeaways, including because as a writer, I want to know what a reader feels. And so,
Yeah, that's
uh,
an interesting question.
it's an important aspect for me to learn, and I want to learn from you about what
Mm.
your assessment of the book was.
Oh, it's such a great question. And I I felt like because it resonated so much with me as a person, I felt it was really inspiring. What's also really interesting, I think, is how you kind of wrote between it being so like tool based, like you said, and being a fictional story. I found that for me that it made it really easy to relate to because sometimes when I read fantasy, I just delve myself into a different world and it's hard to sometimes relate your life to that. And then when you just read like something that's more self-development or like toolkit based, then you're very like in your mind, and so being able to bring those two worlds together, I think is really beautiful. And to me, it was really inspiring in my own journey of entrepreneurship and also creating community around the world. So that was my takeaway from it and reading it. So I really appreciate that.
Well, thank you for that. I hope that, if your readers or anybody has any questions, we can always create an interactive exchange, and you are such a gift to the world of podcasts that I wish you tremendous success. And let us see how we can create another beautiful journey of entrepreneurship in the now together.
Thanks, Sanjeev. I really appreciate that. And to everyone listening out there, stay tuned until the next field session. And I really hope that wherever you are in your journey, you are reading, you are happy, and you are happily reading. And until the next time.